Item number 6, presentation of hydrology report from River Ranch and from Thornhill Group. Mr. Thornhill.
So this is a little high tech, this is low tech. I understand this one better than this one, but we'll see what we do here. President Peak, members of the board, Mr. Casey, I really appreciate the opportunity to once again work with you, try to assist you with your pursuit of developing groundwater supplies. For those of you who don't know, my name is Mike Thornhill. I'm president and owner of Thornhill Group Inc. out of Round Rock, Texas, and I've been doing groundwater studies across Texas since about 1989. So this is what I do: water resources, water supplies. We've been involved with AMWA for how many years? 10 years. And so this is kind of a continuation of some of that work. I'll be back to, let's go on to this one. Primary questions raised, I think, were can the Wilcox Aquifer, can it sustain long-term production that AMWA is looking to possibly develop? That's an aquifer question. Number 2 is what would the well field look like? And we looked at some preliminary ideas of how much water to produce up to 3 million gallons a day, maximum 3,360 acre-feet a year. And what does that look like? That is not so much an aquifer question as it is an economic question. That is, can the wells do it? How many wells? How far apart? What's the engineering? Those types of things. What will the long-term effects be? This is to your question, I think, and I hope we address that a little bit. We can't address every little possibility, but we addressed it in the report. We'll get to it in a minute. Are there any regulatory or planning hurdles to overcome, and what are the next steps? That's what we tried to address in this report. The work that we conducted, and a whole lot of what we did, was we took the information from the several drilling and testing programs that AMWA has done. There's no better thing for a geologist than a geophysical log, and then a test well. And so there's been that here. There were some test wells, geophysical logs at the various sites, as well as my former boss and mentor wrote a report for this area back in the 70s. It's one of the best groundwater reports you could ever read. We used that. We used groundwater availability models. We used other resources to do the study. We did some modeling. We did a little bit of groundwater modeling with what's called the Groundwater Availability Model, or GAM, that the Texas Water Development Board approved for this area. And that is for a look at the aquifer. It's not a very good model for local things in terms of well by well by well, but it's a good model for looking at what's going to happen in the aquifer, particularly a mile or more from the well field. And then we did what's called a TICE analytical model, and that's a model where we look at well fields, we look at pumping rates, and we kind of fine tune, and it's better for the interior of the well field and specific questions about that. We also compiled an inventory of local wells in the area from the state records. The state records are much improved over what they used to be. So we know that there are at least 168 water wells within a 5-mile radius of the treatment plant here. And I think 98 of them are private domestic wells. There are a number of irrigation wells and maybe 20 public supply wells, if there are that many, within 5 miles. So we looked at those. We looked at, to the extent we could, we looked at how they're completed. We looked at what the water levels are reported to be. If they don't have a water level that's reported, we looked at the best records we could to kind of estimate that and see what the impacts would be on those wells. And then we reviewed the regulatory management and planning context. And that starts with the Natchez and Trinity Valley's Groundwater Conservation District, and then they work with other districts in the area, in this area over the Wilcox Aquifer called GMA 11, Groundwater Management Area 11. And some of the things that they work out there apply to what Region C can approve in their water plan. We'll talk about that in a minute. So what are the key factors? One of the key factors for are the aquifer character and its geometry. You'll see this in a minute with a cross section. The Wilcox is a dipping aquifer. It's very shallow to the west, and it's at land surface to the west and north, a little bit mainly west. and it dips down to the east and gets deeper and deeper until you get a little bit east of here, and then it starts coming back up to the Sabine uplift. So it's kind of a bowl, so to speak. There are three kind of individual layers. There's a shallow layer that's not as sandy. There's a middle layer that well number 2 is completed in, and then there's a deeper layer that y'all drilled some test wells into. And some of the deeper layer has good quality water, and some of the deeper layer gets a little bit salty. The other key factors are the aquifer storage, inflows, and outflows. And this is something that's really hard to wrap your head around. It's taken me a long time, in fact, but this aquifer stores, the Carrizo-Wilcox combined, just in Henderson County, stores 60 million acre-feet of water. 60 million acre-feet of water. Now, if you take the Carrizo off, you're gonna have the Wilcox, and it's gonna be something less, but it's still gonna be tens of millions of acre-feet of water are stored in Henderson County alone beneath your feet. Okay, that's a lot of water. So one thing that's easy, we can't pump enough water to dry it up, ever. And economically we couldn't. So the aquifer is full, and I'll show you how I know that in just a minute. The other thing is when we pump water out of an artesian aquifer, it's a dipping artesian aquifer like this, we actually cause more recharge to come in. If you reduce the storage a little bit, water comes in to replace it. Right now in the outcrop area, there's a whole lot of water being rejected, kicked back. The aquifer's full, so it can't come in. It's being rejected, either the trees drink it, or the springs and seeps, and so that's how it's rejected. So when we reduce the storage, we actually draw more water in, and then there's some leakage a little bit from the overlying aquifers here, and where the well field is, we have the little bit of the Carrizo at the top, and so some leakage down also comes in. The hydraulic characteristics, that's the productivity. If you're familiar with oil field permeability, same type of thing. And the middle and lower layers are under artesian pressure, which means they're under pressure. They're so full that they're under pressure. And we'll explain that with a diagram here in a minute. And they're pretty productive. I've seen better, but I've seen a lot worse. And so they're pretty productive layers. The water quality in the middle zone is very, very fresh. Everything around here is less than 200 milligrams per liter of total dissolved solids, which is one of the best measures of the mineralization of the water. The TCQ's requirement is 1,000 milligrams per liter, so well below that. And then the lower layer is a little bit higher, 500 milligrams per liter, and maybe higher in some places. And again, if you go too deep, you're going to get into some water that may exceed the drinking water standard. Regulatory management and planning, there's going to have to be some more permits gotten from the Natchez and Trinity Valley Groundwater Conservation District. They should grant them. There's recent history that they've been reasonable with some other clients of mine. And so I think that I don't see a real problem there, but there are some things that they're going to have to consider and change potentially with respect to their groundwater availability estimates. So it may require revisions to the GMA 11 plans and the regional water planning group plans. So here is the Wilcox Aquifer. Here's the land surface. And so here we go. This is the outcrop of the creek. This is where the treatment plant is, and the well is planned to be right there. So this at land surface, this is all called the Queen City sand. The Queen City, where it's saturated, is an aquifer that produces a little bit of water in this area. It's got a lot of water in it, but it's just shallow and thin and kind of junky, and so it produces a little bit of water. The Carrizo is at land surface right here. So you'll see the sandier hills a little bit to the west, that's the Carrizo. And, oops, there we go. And so it's at land surface here, and then it is dipping this way, so it goes underground here. And in this area, maybe 150 feet thick, something like that. And then the Wilcox crops out over here. And it's got a broad outcrop because it's got those different layers, and it dips down also to the east. You'll see this line A to A prime, that's a cross section we're gonna show you right now. It's based on geophysical logs that we got in the area. So there it is. So you see at land surface, there's the Powder River track here and Frank's track right there. You have a little bit of Queen City, a little bit of what's called the Red Claw, which separates the Queen City from the Carrizo. Have a little bit of Carrizo, and then you have your upper, middle, and lower Wilcox layers. And as you can see, it's a hard scale to see, but it dips probably 50 or 60 feet a mile, I think, something along those lines. Again, it stores, the Wilcox Aquifer by itself stores tens of millions of acre-feet of water in Henderson County alone. As I said earlier, pumping induces more recharge, inflows, and leakage. We can't dry it up. It's got a pretty good depth and good sand thickness. And the key questions would be, how much would you develop from the middle and how much from the lower? And can we maintain artesian conditions? We'll explain artesian in just a minute. So we ran the GAM. We ran the GAM model, and we did it. We ran several different scenarios. We put all the pumping in the middle layer at one time, and then we put some pumping in the lower layer and the middle layer to see what it would do. And the long story short, that over 30 years, the aquifer would still be under artesian conditions locally after pumping up to 3,360 acre feet. Obviously, if we put some in the middle and some in the lower, it reduces the drawdown in each layer or something. But even putting it all into the middle layer, it gets to the lower part of the top of the, right close to the top of the aquifer, but it stays under artesian conditions under those, with that pumping amount at those locations. And typically these models overestimate drawdown. They just do. They always have, especially for longer periods of time. So one of the primary purposes of this whole exercise is, what are we going to do at Powder River Track number 3? What are we going to put the well in? How much can it produce? What's it going to do? And so the initial plans are for it to be completed in the middle zone only. And I agree with that. And we think we should just do a straight wall well, maybe as big as 14 inches. We think it can produce enough water to do that. But the sand at Powder River Track number 3 is a little bit thinner than at other sites. So that's another reason we want a little bit bigger diameter to allow for better entrance velocities into the well. Entrance velocities translate to well efficiency. And so if your well is efficient, then you get less drawdown per gallon per minute than if it's not efficient. We estimate an initial maximum rate of about, I should have put about 1,000 gallons a minute in there based on the testing that's been done. And that's a maximum rate, which means we're using all the available drawdown. Let me talk about that a little bit. So we have an estimated water level of about 300 feet. It may be a little higher than that, but we were a little conservative, a below ground level. The top of the aquifer is about 650 feet. Okay, so this is what we mean by artesian. You have the aquifer here, and if there's no hole punched in it, the water can't come up, but it's under pressure. If you have grandkids or kids, and you open a juice box and you stick the straw in it, you can't help but squirt some juice out of it by squeezing the side. That's creating the pressure that causes it to do that. You haven't changed the volume so much, but you've changed the pressure. That's what this is all about. So it's under pressure. There's no way for the water to get up until you poke a hole in it. So as soon as you poke a hole in it and put a well in it, the pressure causes the water level in the well to rise up above the top of the aquifer up into the well bore. In this case, we're talking about 350 feet of head above the aquifer. So the aquifer's full. Even when you see 100 feet change here, the aquifer hadn't changed in terms of its being full or not. It's still completely full. You've reduced the pressure. Now, does it matter? Yeah, because it changes the lift that you have to operate against to get your water out of there. So anyway, so with a well production, the way we determine pumping rate is we determine a specific capacity based on, it's related to the permeability or the transmissivity of the aquifer, and then an amount of available drawdown. And available drawdown can be, if you want to use it all, it can be 300 feet. If you want to use 100 feet, it can be that. And so this maximum rate's based on pumping pretty much all of the available drawdown. Okay, so over time, we'll see that will decrease a little bit. The rate will decrease with interference drawdown, and I may get out of order here, and I'll just get out of order here. So let's go back to here. So if none of the wells are pumping, we have this pressure and the water levels are right there. And they'll do this, and if somebody else pumps 10 miles away, we might see a little bit of change. In fact, over the last several years, somebody's been pumping because the water levels have gone down some. So anyway, they're sitting there like this. Now, if we turn this well on, similar to your drawing, we do create a cone of depression, but it's not a dewatering of the aquifer, it's a pressure reduction. So the aquifer's still full, the water's moving toward this well, and the pressure reduces, and that pressure reduction goes out a good ways. And we'll show you some diagrams here how far it can go out. In central Texas, where this aquifer is 3,000 feet deep and huge, and we see a few feet of water level decline go out for 30 miles. And it goes out a long way. We don't have that here, and again, the geometry of the aquifer won't let us do that here. So we get this drawdown here, and it will go over and affect that well a little bit. And if we turn them both on, drawdown is additive. So if we turn them both on, this one affects that one, and this one affects that one, and you can see they both affect each other a little bit, so the resulting water level is even deeper. Like that's called interference drawdown. So, but you can see that the aquifer is still full and it's still under pressure. It's just you need more pump, more lift to get it up to the surface. Does that make sense? Again, we talked about the water quality. It's good, and I believe that the lower Wilcox should be explored if you guys go on to more water, because it's. I think in some places it's pretty good quality. Now, those are questions that you need to answer with terms of what's your quality that you want to deliver. If we do explore the lower Wilcox, the water quality will be a blend. So if we have 500 milligrams per liter of this and 200 milligrams per liter of this, and it's 1-to-1 ratio, then you're talking about whatever that is, 350 milligrams per liter of water, which is excellent quality, by the way. It may just be different than what people are used to. So that's a question that the board needs to consider. I just went through that already. I jumped ahead of myself. So that's what we just talked about. So we'll skip most of that. Drawdown is additive. The balance is how far apart do we put the wells, what kind of pumping rates, and we want to optimize production and minimize cost. So that's kind of that'll get into some engineering later, and also the hydraulics. Do we pump these two over here? Do we pump this one over here? And it comes into how much pipeline costs and how much water. But what we've determined is that we can do it with this study. If you get too many wells too close together, you start diminishing your pumping rates, where it's not, you're just going the opposite. You know, you're spending more money than you're getting out of it. So we already did that too. So this is at 2 zones. If one well was completed in the middle zone and one well in the deep zone, then they don't interfere with each other. That's the bottom line. They just don't. They might a little bit over a long time, but right next to each other they won't. And so it's a way that if, for example, if there's one site and you have a good deep sand and a good middle sand, you could put 2 wells at that site, isolated separately in each zone, and optimize your infrastructure that way. So here's the analytical model of drawdown, and this line is 5 miles. So within here there are 168 wells, and this line is 5 miles. And so you get quite a bit of drawdown at the well sites, and they interfere with each other. That's 100 feet right there, and that's pumping 2 million gallons a day. Okay, that's but spread between 3 wells. That's not exactly what we talked about at first here, would be between these 2 wells, but it'd be very similar. When we did this modeling, it showed the benefit of tapping the middle and the lower. Both zones remain artesian, and again, this no doubt overstates drawdown. It's an analytical model that's based on certain things, and we know that it overstates drawdown because it doesn't consider any leakage, it doesn't consider any recharge, it doesn't consider things like that. So, but still, it's a pretty good picture, and so I'll look in here if I can see better. I'm sorry I can't see that. As you get further away, let's go to this one. Well, with one well pumping, right out at the, for a long, long time, right there, you'll see up to, the number here, can't see the number? Well, 20 feet of drawdown. 20 feet of drawdown out of the red line. 20 feet of, when I say drawdown, that's pressure reduction, but if you have a well out there that's completed in exactly the same zone, you could see 20 feet of drawdown after a long, years and years and years and years.
That's that farthest line out.
Yeah, out here. Yeah. So it is a cone, so it gets steeper and steeper and steeper the closer you get to the pumping wells. Okay. So, what does that do to the nearby wells? And we looked at that, and that's a consideration that needs to be monitored a lot. So you can't see some of these well identifications, but you can see here's the middle zone and the lower zone and the upper zone. So some of the wells are just into the upper zone, and they won't be affected by this.
And what is that depth?
Oh, that depth is. That's right here, that's 500 to, that's about 300 feet deep, probably, right there, 300 to 400 feet. Okay. Wells that are completed in the middle zone, they'll see some effect. And then nobody that we know of has any private wells done into the lower zone so far. So the ones that are in the carrizo, there are a few just into the carrizo, they won't see anything. And there are probably some little shallow wells even in between cities that won't see anything. So let's look at some diagrams that we did. This is an example well of a nearby well. It's an irrigation well. It's a big well. It's constructed a whole lot like a public supply well. And so back in 2008, the water level was here. We're estimating here based on a model that was produced by the Water Development Board. It may not be that deep. And then, so you can see this, what is that, 50, 60 feet or so of decline projected due to AMWA pumping if they pump all of it. Okay, if they pump 3 million gallons a day. Okay, so you can see that if their pump is set right there, they're gonna have to lower it. But if they lower it, they can still get the water out. Again, the aquifer stays full. They just have to, these folks would actually have, if this is where their pump is set, and if this happens, according to the models, then they would need to lower their pump to continue to get their water. But they can continue to get and their well is completed to where they can lower it. Okay, so that one is mitigated by lowering a pump. Does it cost money? Yep, it costs a little money. And then the extra pumping lift is about 3 cents per 1,000 gallons per 50 feet of head. So for most small water well owners and users, it's probably $1 a day type thing of increased cost. If it's lowered that by 50 or 100 feet. So this one can be lowered to where they can still get their supply. Here's another one, it's a domestic well. And I think it's probably a 4-inch casing, yep, 4-inch PVC. Although our casing got erased over there somehow. And, again, this was the measured water level in 2008. The estimate for 2015, based on the Water Development Board's report, is about there. And this one's pretty close, so we're talking about 100+ feet of drawdown. 100-something feet. Again, if their pump is there, they're okay right now. They won't be in 30 years. Okay? But they can lower it down to here and be okay. Is it a hassle? Yes. Does it cost a little money? Yes. But the water supply is still there. And that's going to be the case with probably most of them. There are some that have had some, we've talked to Mr. Foster and Jacob, and where some have mechanical problems where they can't lower a pump, and that's going to be an issue. Some wells are completed where they have a reduction where they can't lower, but not very many. I haven't seen very many of those that were completed. Out of the 168, I haven't seen very many at all that were completed to where the pump could not be lowered enough to get the water out. I don't know if I saw any, but we don't know everything about every well. We did this from records available from the Water Development Board. So in summary, the local aquifer conditions indicate that the groundwater resources are available to allow AMWA to pursue effective conjunctive use of its surface water and groundwater resources. And that allows for some really good things. You're in control. You're in control of your management. You can decide how to manage. You can decide your cost benefits. The water quality is good. You can maintain that. Redundancy. If something goes down over here, you've got something over here to keep it going without any hesitation. And then this is a big one. This is people look at me like I'm crazy. Well, a lot of people think I'm crazy, but no, I'm kidding. But this drought protection, the Carrizo Wilcox Aquifer, the Gulf Coast Aquifer, the Trinity Aquifer, all the aquifers kind of east of I-35 in this part of the state, they are drought proof. They are not affected by drought. The recharge mechanism is slow. It's from a big area. The storage, again, we've got 60 million acre-feet of water stored in this aquifer just in one county. And the water flows from a lot different, a bigger area than that. So you will not see large changes in water levels due to drought ever, other than people pump more. When people pump more, you see a local change, but then when people pump less, it recovers quickly. So it's a 100% drought protection. And so that's something that most people don't realize. So we modeled up to 3 million gallons a day, an average, or 3,360 acre feet a year from the middle and/or the middle and lower Wilcox. To get that amount, certainly you could start off with probably 3 wells, but the pumping rates will decline as interference happens over time, and so you would need more wells. It's probably 3 to 5 wells to do it, maybe more, depending on the site-specific hydraulics and the well efficiencies. And also depending on what you want to do, your operators want to do with respect to peak pumping and redundancy. So that would control how many wells you do. Again, the pumping rates will decline over a long period of time. We talked about well number 3, we think a straight wall 14-inch will give you that optimal pumping rate, a larger pumping rate early that would be useful. We talked about the neighbors' wells. Water levels will decline, but most should maintain their supplies. I can't guarantee all of them will because of the way they're constructed, but it's not because of the aquifer. It's because of a well construction issue. And then, based on what I see, I think you only have 1 permit right now with Nation Trinity Valley, and it's not even enough to do 1 million gallons a day. It's about 767 acre feet a year, and so if you want 1 million gallons a day is 1,120. So if you want to increase that, you need to do that, and obviously for other permits would need to be had, and then because of it's in the report, but because of a limitation in what's called the modeled available groundwater, which is a limit created by this thing called a desired future condition of the aquifer. the model available groundwater for Henderson County is pretty low. It's like 1,300 acre feet out of the Wilcox. It's not very much water, and it's all based on it's based on the 2007 water plan, when they thought that's how much water was gonna be pumped. There's a lot more water available. So probably AMWA would need to participate in that process to get that changed, because that number goes into the state water plan. So if you want this to be approved in the state water plan 100%, you'll need to get the permits and you'll need to get the DFCs changed so that the MAG gets bigger, and that gets into the Region C water plan. And then right now, your well field is listed in Region C water plan as an alternative, what do you call it? Alternative management strategy. And so what you want it to be is a recommended management strategy, because then it's available for, if you want, funding and different things like that. But, so that would just need to be done as part of the permit process. So that's running through it pretty quick. Oh, the recommendations, and y'all may already have this, I don't know, a detailed planning study for conjunctive use, some sort of master water plan, some kind of cost feasibility thing. But part of it is, what do you want to do? When you decide what you want to do, then we can figure out the best way to put it in there. Specific engineering and design needs to be done for Powder River Track number 3. We think we know how to do that now. I would recommend some additional production testing of well number 2. Based on the records I see, the specific capacity seems a little lower than what I would expect with the transmissivities that I think we saw there during initial testing. It doesn't hurt to test them every once in a while anyway to make sure they're doing okay. If you start seeing specific capacity drop-offs, you can have things like iron bacteria, different things like that start growing, and you're gonna wanna catch that before it gets too far. And so I would recommend a test on well number 2, pretty soon, actually. Again, your permitting, we talked about that. I would also recommend a long-term monitoring program. You already have some monitoring wells in place. Some of them have pumps in them, I believe, for sampling. I don't think that's all that necessary anymore. I would maybe take those out and put, on some of them, and put automated water level recorders in there, and just have that baseline start now. They're cheap, they're accurate, they can be downloaded easily, you can do them with SCADA if you want, but you want to get a baseline of the aquifer conditions, and then particularly now that you're pumping out of well number 2. Again, maybe a little bit more drilling and testing for the lower Wilcox at some selected sites. And then an interactive database for the local wells. More of this well inventory idea. Get to know these 168 or however many wells are out there a little bit, and see what the potential issues are going to be. We know a lot of them, but we don't know everyone. So that's it. I hope I didn't take too long. And, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
I'm thinking cost. You said the first one would go into the middle level, and then maybe the second well go into a lower level. And I'm thinking cost. Would it be feasible to put one at the same place? I know you said it shouldn't interfere, so we could save us cost-wise as far as running more lines than that if we drilled it at the same place.
So my specific thought on that at Powder River 3, I don't believe there was a deep test well done there. So the first thing when I go drill this well, I would go ahead and drill my pilot hole all the way into the lower unit and log it to see if it's there. And from the log, we can see, is it fresh? Is it pretty fresh? Is it pretty productive looking? And we can see then. But yes, I would absolutely plan on coupling those up. There's a utility near Lexington, Texas, that does that. There's 2 zones in the Simsboro, which is the middle part of the Wilcox, and they put one here and one there, and they don't interfere with each other, and just so you can minimize your infrastructure while optimizing your production.
And you're saying that would be a 3, not 2?
Yes.
It would be a 3.
Okay.
Yes.
I think we didn't go any deeper than
Yep.
800 feet
At
at Powder River.
Powder River number 1, there's one that went deep, and it was favorable.
Okay.
One is which one?
It's to the southeast, I think, I don't,
Where we put the test well,
yeah.
on the Franks track?
Well, no, there's one on Powder River.
Okay. I just,
I can't remember the numbers exactly, but it's to
They're
the,
backwards.
it's to the south or east. So, there was one log that went into there, and then, there's some others further east that show some good sand in the deeper part. Depth is your friend in the long term, and also, that way you can manage the interference, and you can double up sites. So,
What,
Go ahead.
no, I got a question right now. We haven't pumped, out of the well, roughly, what, 700 acre feet?
mhm.
Our well pumping 700 acre feet, how does that affect anybody in the area?
We modeled that, actually.
Yeah.
We did it in the report, and it's, in 2017, what you reported was 727 acre feet. And I think 2018, you're on track for a little bit more than that, maybe. And we modeled it to where it was about, well, it's 30 feet of drawdown, less than a mile, or 20 feet of drawdown, less than a mile from the well site, and then 10 feet out a couple of miles. You know, so, and there have been some phone calls, and Jacob Stanton called me and said, hey, we're getting some calls. I ran a quick model, and it was matching up. I mean, so these 10 and 20 foot changes were happening, and it matches the pumping, so.
And that's from the well at.
Well,
Treatment plant.
well,
Yeah.
too.
Okay, that's what I want.
So
Yeah.
the volume we pumped in 17, I believe we talked would be 236 million.
In 2017.
In 2017,
Yes, sir.
saying here now we're at 209 million, and
Yeah.
water people are looking at what we do the next 2 months.
Yeah, and
Because we're maxed out at 250.
Right.
But the way they're talking, we're not gonna go
So
close.
we're about the
to-
same, we should be about the same place this year we were last year.
Mhm.
Now, that's pretty, when you go back to when we actually really started using the well, I mean, the well was put in what, 14, 15 years?
Yeah, there was just a little bit of pumping in 15.
Right,
and 16 a little bit.
11 million?
Yeah.
So you're talking 3 miles out at 10-foot drop.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
what I needed to know.
So and the other thing about drawdown, I wish I had a whiteboard, but drawdown is logarithmically related to time and distance. And so a lot of the drawdown happens early, and then it flattens out with time. So within the first few years is when you get most of the drawdown, and then it starts to flatten out and be less and less. Now, as you add pumping, it increases, but at any one site, most of the drawdown happens pretty quickly.
Mike, do you go ahead and secure your permit now?
You know, that's they want a drilling permit first. And, so I don't think so, I think you want to talk to them. I think you guys need to figure out your plan. This is my thinking.
Right.
You figure out what you want to do, and then go sit down and talk with them a little bit. And, but I don't think you need to secure it first. Obviously, you need to secure it before you make any expenditures. But I have a feeling they're gonna be reasonable.
So can you secure a future permit also at that time? Or can you overgrab?
Can you, your board, there's so many, each district, there are 100 districts across Texas, and they're all different a little bit. So I don't know, I haven't studied whether you
Usually
can.
have several clients that have future, that have the right to be able to pump the water within the 3 county districts.
And the right of capture is what runs that permit.
Well, yes, I mean, now,
Plus the model.
yeah, the model available groundwater is what they don't want to permit more than that amount, which, that's a problem, and that's a real problem that I don't think they can defend,
Right.
to be honest with you. Because of the rule capture, and because of the Supreme Court cases in 2012 and all this stuff, if you own the land, you own the water. And so, mainly, they're gonna wanna ask you how you're gonna use it, when you're gonna use it, and they're gonna try to limit you to what you think you need. And so those are some of the things I think that should be discussed because you're a utility, and you need to plan for 30, 40, 50 years.
50 years, this is a 50-year plan, that's right.
And so,
Those future permits that we have
Right.
are taking part of the aquifer of the water that's available.
right,
So what Mike is saying, we need to get in line.
And to change our current permit is, we need to do that anyway.
you need to do that right now, I think. Yep. So,
Does a timeline for, I guess, production, does that equate to dollars also? I mean, if we go faster, is it more expensive? If we draw this out over a 2-year period to get the production ready to go to the city, does our cost to do it go down any? Or is it hurry up and get it done now? I mean,
I don't know if I can answer that. I don't know if I know the answer to that. And with what respect are you?
well, I mean, if you say you can get this done in 6 months, and we'll be producing water to go to the city in 6 months,
Mhm.
is that cost higher than it is if we said, we've got 18 months?
I can't think of any reason it would be higher other than whatever, just normal fluctuation in material costs and, you know,
And that's-
economics. Yeah, but no real benefit either way, that I know of, from the overall process, just
Well,
normal.
we really want to go slow right now, so.
I think you're okay with that. I do think you need to get in front of the Nexus and Trinity Valleys and let them know what your plans
I don't
are.
know anybody there.
They're hard to deal with too.
So,
I know some.
you know, I've got scars for some districts across the state, so, where we've had 10, 12-year permit fights, so
Seriously?
Oh, yeah, no, I've had 3 of them that took 15 years to get permits, so that's tough. I don't think this was that way.
No, sir, it's not.
So when I hear district, I go like this, that's kind of why. So, but I do think you need to get that settled in, and you want to get the mag changed. That's a 5-year process. It's every 5 years. And they've just now gotten to where they've synced up the GMA 11, or the GMA process with the regional water planning process. And where this counts is, whatever the mag is from the district or from the GMA, the state says that's how much groundwater is available. And so they won't consider anything that exceeds that as part of the water plan. Okay, which is why your plan is not in the water plan as a recommended water management strategy. Now, is the water there? Yes, and they even say, the water plan says you're doing it already. The water's there, but they want you to get it changed administratively so that it can be included in the water plan. And there are some, again, for those entities that want state funding, need state funding, having it in the water plan is a requirement.
Bonnie's got a question.
Question from the audience.
Yes.
For a layperson, on the gallons you're talking about available, with a 14-inch well, how many more wells can be put in Powder?
That's a really good question. And I'm not gonna hedge a little, I'm gonna say this, I think the spacings need to be a little larger. I think the 5,000 and 6,000 foot spacings are better, to maintain higher pumping rates from fewer wells. You start putting them in, you start getting, I mean, we can put them in close, but the pumping rate will be 400 gallons in, 400 gallons in, 400 gallons in.
Right.
So, that's where we need to do, an engineering balance with what they wanna do and where they wanna put it and when, and balance that out. Because I wouldn't recommend off the top of my head, maybe one more on Powder River Drive, to be honest with you.
But if we went the middle and the lower,
That's
no
different.
problem.
That's different, yes. Yes.
That's where you think.
Yes,
it's more
the middle and lower, I think you can put 2 wells right next to each other and they won't interfere.
Well, we'll have 3 sources of water.
Yes.
How much demand is the city gonna need?
I'm feeling really thirsty next year.
Well, at 3 million gallons would be very doable with one well out there with the other well we have.
Okay.
The problem would happen is if your demand is higher than that, I don't know that we can get you, I don't know that we can deliver more than 3 million gallons a day. I don't know.
Through the pipeline.
Through the pipeline. I think our transmission to you would be, is gonna be limited before our production.
Oh, without a doubt, and, you know, we're just not experiencing that influx of growth right now. I mean, everything I think we're talking about is, and I really appreciate y'all looking that far down the road.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no immediate even, but you answered my question, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I noticed in all your studies there, for the third well, you were showing Frank's track.
Yes.
You were getting off Powder River.
I
altogether.
was from just a spacing standpoint,
Sure.
and when I see bigger, thicker sand, I always want to go there.
Well, but I think the Franks didn't produce as good as Powder River, did it, in the test?
Understand with test wells, you're dealing with, well, I had it on the slide, partial penetration.
Right.
And so you're only, the test wells typically only screen like 20 feet of the sand.
Right.
And so it may not be completely representative of the total aquifer, as well as sometimes test wells aren't efficient, and that's not a knock on anything, it's just they're not supposed to. Their efficiencies can be really low, so the transmissivity was probably better over at the Frank's track. But even though it didn't produce as well, the aquifer was probably a little better.
And Mike, would your recommendation be the test well that we have at Powder River 3, use that as a monitor well and put the well, when we go to drill it, and leave that one there and put one of those?
Yeah, I think so. I would do that. I mean, there's no reason to plug it, to pay to plug it when you can, for $800, put a monitoring system in there that gives you a lot of really good information.
One more question, you're talking about going into that deeper area, how deep is that?
What is it, 900?
900,000.
Yeah, 900,000 feet. And we gotta be careful not to go too deep, because it gets a little saltier. There were some really pretty good sands in that down to about 1,000 feet.
And I don't think we saw that. One test hole that we drilled for Mike and for the board before I was on the board was by the dam. And there's no sand.
Yeah.
It shows you how it can change from your house to mine.
Wow.
There wasn't anything back this way.
That's a really good point. I was supposed to say that earlier, and I forgot. These sand layers are not always uniform, and they kind of change in thickness, and sometimes they'll even go, you know, like I said, it won't be at one site. Something happened in the deposition that.
There was barely enough to make a domestic well on that site. And so moving from there to the plant, the test well that we put in the plant for Mike was productive. That's how come the well's there.
Wow.
And it was productive at parts of Powder River.
And that's another reason the models tend to overestimate the drawdown, because if the sand's not there, it can't get out there. It tries, but it can't.
It's amazing.
Anything else?
Anybody got anything else? Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
Mike. A lot of information, a lot of stuff to mull over.
Yes.
Thank you very much.